I'll make this available to all of you. By the way, I'll make this available. I'll have it on the website. I'll be sending you a follow-up this afternoon with some information, and then I'll make sure this is on the website. Probably give me a couple of days. By early next week, it'll be on the website. And if anybody wants the PowerPoint deck, just send me an email and I'll send it to you. But you'll also have the recording as well. So let's start off. And I thought it would be good before we get too into it. I want to just take this time to thank each of you for being part of this, for taking the time to join us today, for your commitment to leadership learning. And I think it's important. Your influence matters. So much of my work around leadership over to the beginning of the pandemic has really been on influence. Influence matters, and it impacts so many different people in so many different ways in places. So I thought that with you. Let's dive into the program. And before I go too far, I want to just a couple of key points here. Number, not much of a leader, read a lot of slides. You have worked with me before. Thank you for coming back and for being part of this, as I said. But I'm not going to read a lot of slides. I'll highlight some of them. But I think the ultimate value of this is think and learning. I'm often reminded that when I do these, whether it's a webinar virtually or often remind so much wisdom. And I think one of my goals, an important goal, is to help access that, to help tap into that. That's how we think and share and learn. And I want to learn from you as well. And so to that, I want to just to stay. We're going to have a conversation today. This is really perfectly comfortable to mute and share your perspective. That you can use the format if you'd like as well. Reasons why Lisa is here. She'll help you with any of you. Just message into the box, and Lisa will be glad to assist you with part of one of the many things that she does to. It's a good experience for everyone. You to feel comfortable doing through some slides and getting through at 11:59 and a half. It's really about thinking and sharing and learning together. But I also want to build off that theme of conversation. While I hope to have a conversation with you today, I also want you to be thinking about the theme conversation starters. What do I mean? Allow me to explain, please. I think that in many ways, the value of this program will be more fully recognized by what you do with it next week and the week after and the month after that. And I think that one of the ways that you can make that happen is to go back to your place of work and have conversations. And so there'll be many points within the program that I think are pretty clear conversation starters. You know, for those of you that I've worked with before, you know I like to use quotes. I've got some pretty good quotes here. And those would be conversation starters too. But there's a lot of information here. There's a lot of content here that you could take back and very definitely start a conversation with somebody on your team, a colleague, peer, whatever it may be, about this idea of delegating. So I invite you to consider that and be part of that. And please know that this is so much about us having a conversation. So I thought I would start off with this quote by Jessica Jackley. If you're not familiar with Kiva, they're a micro loan organization that was created about 8 years ago to help eliminate poverty in third world countries. And she said that deciding what not to do is as important as deciding what to do. So I like to squeeze some learning out of this. And so I'll just throw it out to you as a group. What do you think that means? What's the story? Why would I have put this here? What's the story that you think it's telling? Anybody? And you can unmute. This is a small group. I think we have 19 people. That's a perfect size group. So feel free to unmute. If you want to use chat, that's fine. What is this quote telling you? Anybody?
Well, you really need to prioritize things and figure out what's important to you to complete. And, you know, we have so much noise in our lives in terms of day-to-day activities, whether it's emails or meetings, you don't necessarily need to go to and those kinds of things.
Yeah,
so
that's a great point. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's Jim, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Jim. So Lisa, would you change his name there to Jim? Jim Hill instead of Dan O'Brien. So I don't want to call you Dan O'Brien, Jim. So at any rate, that's a really good insight. Anybody else? Thank you, Jim. Anybody else?
Hi, Dave.
Is that Kat?
It's Kelly.
Oh, Kelly. Hey, Kelly, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you. Great to have you with us. So what does it mean to you?
For me, it's about being very intentional about what I decide not to do.
Yeah. That's a great word, Kelly. It's a good reminder for all of us. How intentional are we today? Let's just all pause for a second. I needed to hear that, Kelly. Thank you very much. I think some of the others here did too. How intentional are we? I think that's such a great guidepost. Some of you that I've worked closely with know my question that I ask so many times when we're working one-on-one, and that is, so how are you showing up today? And the deeper meaning behind that is really, to Kelly's point, how intentional are you? How deliberate are you being about your influence, about your leadership capacity, specifically about your influence? I think that's a great one, Kelly. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Those are two great ones, Jim and Kelly. Thank you. Anybody else want to add anything to that? Okay. So let's go on to the next one, I think, and that could be a conversation starter. Back to that point, I think that would be a terrific one to share with your team and say, well, okay, so what does it mean to us? Because look what we just squeezed out of that in 35 seconds or 45 seconds. Two really great insights that I think it's fair to say made all of us think. And that, I think that's a really big part of what quotes do and what they're about. So let's create a
Looks like we lost David.
Yeah, he's stopped for me too. I'm going to pause the recording for a moment.
All right. Can I have my slide drive back?
Well, can you share from your phone?
I'm not on my phone.
Oh, you're actually on your computer.
I'm back on my desktop.
I love it when you share. So let's have you share. That's so much better for me and my role.
All right. So here we go. I'm going to share screen, and here it is here. La. Okay, and I'm going to do slideshow. Thank you for your patience, everyone. This is only about the 87th webinar I've done in the last 2.5 years, and it's the first time it's ever happened. So I think we should all go buy a lottery ticket. Thank you. So let's go right to that last slide. I apologize. It's that shift of decision-making authority, but this is a really important activity. I want to get you involved in 3 groups. Lisa's going to coordinate 3 breakout rooms. And you'll be in group 1, group 2, and group 3. Group 1 will be team 1, group 2 will be team 2, and group 3 will be team 3. And I'll put up this slide in your breakout rooms, but here's how we're going to do this. We're going to put you into these breakout rooms. We're going to give you about 5 minutes just to answer the first question. You're each going to have one question. And so team 1, you'll have leader. What value does effective delegation create for the leader? Team 2, you'll have what value does it create for the employee? And then team 3, you'll have what value does it create for the organization? Everybody's clear on that? Any questions before I have Lisa work her magic to put you into your 3 breakout rooms? Everybody good?
Yeah.
Okay, you'll have 5 minutes in the break room. Last thing I'll add is, if you would please be so kind, one of you volunteer to be the scribe and the spokesperson. I think it's a dual role. So if one person would step up and volunteer to be the scribe and the spokesperson, so that when we come back and debrief it, we'll hear from one person for each group. Okay. All right. Thanks, Lisa.
All right, you bet. All right, so leader, employee, and organization team 1, 2, 3. Your rooms will actually be saying that as you're moving in, so that's where you know that what group you're in. You don't have to click anything; it automatically will take you in there. We'll see you in 5.
All right, thank you.
All right, pausing the recording.
Okay.
All right, and they're back.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much. And again, I think we're cooking now. So I want to just go with the first group. That's group number 1. They're going to share with us the value that it creates for the. They're going to share with us the value that it creates for the leader. So who is our spokesperson from group 1?
I am Dave.
Who is that?
Kelly.
Hey, Kelly, thank you.
Yep. So a number of different things. One was that it creates trust in their employees.
Trust, yeah.
It empowers their employees.
Mm-hmm.
It creates better time management for the leader.
Yeah, good one.
It creates clear expectations for the employee in if it's delegated properly.
Yeah.
And gentlemen, please feel free to jump in if I get any of this messed up a little bit.
You're doing a fine job, I think. I wasn't in your room, but I can tell you it sounds pretty good from this end, Kelly. Does anybody have anything else to add to Kelly's point?
There's a couple more points that we came up with,
Oh,
actually.
go for it, please, please. I've got plenty of space here on my paper.
Facilitating the growth of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Creating a better understanding of the process of the day-to-day operations.
Yeah.
Get more done.
Yeah, get more done. Good. What else?
Creating more team and trust.
More back to the trust. Yeah.
Yeah.
More trust. Yeah. Good
so
one.
Creating that working with environment instead of at.
Yeah.
And then the redundancy in leadership. So creating a situation where someone else, if the leader is not available, potentially could jump in.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that you rocked it. I got to tell you, and I've done this activity a bunch of times, Kelly, and the rest of your crew there, and I've never had such a good list. So thank you very much. A big shout out to Team 1 and Kelly. Thank you very much. Who's going to be our spokesperson for number 2, Team 2, the employer value?
Yeah, that's me.
Who's that?
Adib.
Oh, hey, go ahead. Thank you.
Yep. So for the value, for the delegation greeting for the employee, so we had a sense of community, part of the outcomes rather than passively being a part of the organization.
Yeah.
We had ownership of their own responsibilities that are being delegated to them.
Yeah.
It gives them the opportunity to feel empowered.
Yeah.
It gives them a confidence in their own abilities because they're being delegated some task that is unique to them.
Yeah, good stuff.
Feeling valued.
Yeah.
Feeling and then pathway toward upward mobility.
Yeah.
And then it's a learning opportunity, and it could be possibly something new for them to engage in. So
good, excellent stuff, Adib. Thank you very much. Did you have anything else to add to that?
Nope. I think that's it, unless anybody else from our group wants to share anything else. So
that covered a lot of ground. Nice job, Adib. Thank you very much. A shout out to you and Team 2. Who's our spokesperson for Team 3, organizational value?
Hi, David. This is Jim.
Hey, Jim.
So
thanks again for your call, by the way.
Oh yeah, no problem. So we talked about having more engaged employees as a result of effective delegation.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have 10% of the people doing 90% of the work.
Yeah.
It creates a sense of unity.
Mm-hmm.
It's also great to allow cross-training for employees so they learn more about the organization as a whole, and succession planning to develop staff.
Great.
So that's a really important component of that. And then the organization will have better direction. There'll be more trust, more staff involvement, unity, and everyone rowing in the same direction, kind of thing.
Sure.
So anything else from the group?
Anything else from Team 3? That's a great list. I got to tell you, everyone, everybody, Kelly and your team, Adib and your team, Jim and your team, great job all the way around. And I think it makes the very strong case for why we need to do this more, right? I think that's a really big part of it. So a shout out to each and every one of you. But I want to just get to something before we go to the next slide, and that's this. So we've got 18 or 19 people on here. We'll say 19. And now we look at the spectrum of what we're doing with delegation, right? And there's a wide range of things that we're doing with delegation. Some of us have delegated things yesterday, some maybe already this morning. Some of us haven't done it for a week. Some of us maybe haven't done it for 2 weeks, a month. That's not the point. I think the point is, how do we build momentum, right? And so I think it's important. We all get a very clear picture of why this matters and the value that it creates. And I think it's about not looking back and saying, well, I haven't done this very well, or I wish I could have done more of that. That serves nothing. I think the goal here is to look at what can we do more of moving forward. And that's really the story behind it. So I'll go to this next slide that gives some more benefits. So this will give you some more. I mean, I think we covered most of this. And I think that I think that we have a lot of this covered already, but I thought I would add this as an example. So here's some more things that create the more benefits of it, just as a frame of reference. But let's go a little bit further and look at what gets in our way, right? What gets in our way? So it's too hard. It takes too much time. Nobody can do it as good as I can. This is another good one. Nobody else has any time either, right? Oops, I'm sorry. I'm having problems with my mouse too. What else though? What are some other barriers that get in the way of us doing more doing delegation or delegating more frequently? What gets in your way? Can anybody think of anything else? It's too hard. It's too much time. Everybody else is busy, et cetera, et cetera. Can you think of any other barriers that other people, not maybe necessarily you, but others might encounter on their road to delegating more effectively? Can anybody think of any other barriers?
I would say it's just overall communication. You know, the landscape has changed quite a bit in organizations with work from home.
Yeah. Oh boy, that's a really good one. Yeah, I'm glad I asked that question. Yeah, and so that communication, and I think communication in general is a key part of it. And then when you add in that layer of the fact that we've got this mixed kind of hybrid model in some cases where we have some people on the team that are remote, some people are in the office. Sometimes that rotates. That's a big factor. So I think it's a good one to consider. And then figuring out, well, how do we adapt to that, right? We're going to spend a little bit of time, actually a lot of time, talking about how do we communicate the process in a little while. So hopefully that will speak to it. But can anybody else think of anything else?
Yeah, I would suggest not great management style, but avoiding conflict, maybe. Like you don't want to deal with someone saying no to you or dealing
Okay, good. Yeah, Dave, that's a great insight too, right? You do it to avoid conflict because maybe based on history with the person, they could be agitated if you ask them to do that, right? Or whatever. Or you may know that they've got some things going on in their life that might make them a little bit sensitive to being asked to do something, right? So in an effort to avoid that, you don't bring it up. Yeah, that's a great one. Wow. I never thought of that one. I love it though. It's great. Anything else?
Dave, it's Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
My apologies for having to stop you doing where you are. I've lost host role. Can you make me host again?
Oh, I sure can.
Thanks.
I don't know how that happened. So, okay, I got to tell everyone, we've done this before. I think I said that this is probably my 87th webinar in 2.5 years, and it's probably my 58th or 70th with Lisa Galla. So this is too funny.
We're in business.
We're grateful for your patience with us. We're rocking though. So that's good. Can anybody else think of anything else?
I would also add that, I'm sorry, this is Jordan. I would also add there's a time investment involved in some cases. If you're trying to delegate, but the person lacks context or a skill set, you have to spend additional time with them to bring them up to speed in order to delegate a specific task to them. So some people might avoid delegation because they have the context. So why not just do it myself?
Yeah, it's a great, and it's one that I've wrestled with. I've got to tell you, it's one that I've wrestled with myself because I think about, okay, how much time this is going to take to explain this, or how, what their skill level is, or what their experience level is. It's going to require a lot of extra time, and that becomes a variable, right? And it's one that can very, very definitely become a barrier. But we're going to look more at that in a second. So let's look at the ways, knowing when to delegate. I think this is a good frame of reference. And there's others here too, but I think it's important to consider, when the task is a valuable training for the employee. I think that's an important part of it, when it's a learning opportunity for them, when they have more knowledge or experience related to it than you or maybe someone else, when it's a reoccurring task and all employees should know it or be prepared to do it or train. When the task is a low priority, I think that's certainly one to consider. And then, can you think of any other scenarios? Look at my bonus question on the bottom. Can you identify any other scenarios that might be worth considering in terms of knowing when to delegate? Does anything come to mind? Anybody? I think these are good, but I'm always of the belief that there's more. There's always more, I think this is a good solid foundation. I think they're good it's a good frame of reference. But
to build on the last point, if you have changing priorities,
yeah,
it may help you manage those changing priorities. Like if you have an emergency come up,
yeah,
then now you have new high priority tasks.
yeah. Yeah, that's a really good variable, and I'm sure all of us will experience that if we haven't already, right? But all of us, that's something that's part of the leadership toolkit or part of the leadership sandbox, if you will, right? I think that's a great insight. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've certainly had employees come to me with suggestions for things that should happen, but not necessarily the idea that they would take on the leadership roles for those. So turning that back around and delegating that back to them to take charge of.
Yeah. You just made me think of a great quote that I saw yesterday. Lou Gerstner, who used to be the CEO of IBM, he has a famous quote that's "No prizes for predicting rain, only for building arcs." And that's a great correlation to that point, because we've all had people come to us and say, hey, we should do this, we should do that, right? Well, okay, what are you going to do, right? But I think you're absolutely right. It's so spot on. To turn it around and engage them, I think, is really great. So to whom should we delegate? How do we know which is the right person? And you're going to be doing several things in the next few slides to get you thinking about who on your team is a prime candidate for you to delegate something. So we're not going to miss that opportunity by any means. But I think these are some things to consider. So what's the target outcome and the timeline that's related to it? The person's workload, their strengths, their weaknesses, perhaps, their history. I think their history of meeting your expectations, their expertise level, their training, and so forth. I think those are all really important considerations. I think some of the ones we just heard are good considerations too, like what the priorities are when we have a high priority task that maybe comes up that we need to juggle, a new task. That could be one too. But here's a bonus question. What do you think is, if you were to use this as a model to decide who you delegate to, is there an optimal sequence here? I'm just curious. I don't know if there is, but I thought there's a lot of wisdom on this webinar right now, so I thought I would add that as a bonus question. Is there an optimum sequence here? Does anybody want to weigh in on that? Is there an optimum sequence? Is this the right sequence? Is there something missing? I just think that the more wisdom I can tap into, the better we're all going to be. Anybody?
I think one of the problems of the last bullet is history of meeting exceeding expectations. People tend to delegate more to people that meet and exceed expectations, so they tend to get more stuff thrown their way.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you got to be careful to avoid that.
Yeah. All right. So you're going to get this story. I wasn't sure if there would be a place for this story, but it's so spot on to what your point is. And I think Aviv, it's a great point. So years ago, I had gone through a 360, and some of the feedback that I got, a key related to this, was my team felt that I didn't trust them. And I thought, where the heck did that come from? I trust them. I think they're the most amazing group of people I've ever worked with. How could they think that I don't trust them? And then when I dug deeper, it said that I trusted some people more than others. And I thought, wow, I don't think that's what I'm doing, but I appreciate the feedback. Let me get to the bottom of it. Here's what it came down to. The overall theme of not trusting them was that they felt that I wasn't giving them enough work, that I wasn't giving them the key projects, that I was doing them myself, that I didn't trust them. And then the comment of I trusted some people more than others, that related to exactly what you just said, that some people on my team were getting the better assignments than others. And I thought long and hard about that. And I said, well, okay, my blind spot, I've got to be aware of this, but I've got to be more deliberate about how do I delegate? And specifically to your point, your excellent point, Adib, do I delegate across the range of my team or just to the A players? Because here's the truth, and you know this, I'll say it anyway, that we're dealing with human beings. And so we have A players and B players and C players on our team. That's just what makes the world go wrong. It's not faulting anyone. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not belittling or disparaging anyone. It's just a fact of it's a human nature, right? And so what happens is we have a tendency to go to those, to your point, to go to the ones that are going to get it done. So if I've got employee A and she is consistently hitting it out of the park, doing a great job, and it's a really visible project, am I going to give it to her or give it to employee B, who's done a pretty good job for me, but he's really hit it out of the park? Well, guess what? My brain is going to say, give it to the proven entity, right? I'm going to give it to employee A. So I think we need to be mindful of the fact that that could, in fact, be a disadvantage for that employee B, because he or she never had an opportunity to have a project where they hit it out of the park. So I think those are really, really worth key things to consider. Let's go a little bit further and look at this continuum. And I think that this is a really good frame of reference to kind of look at the different, I think of it as the stages of delegating. And so, the first one is do as I say, do this, get this done. Another one could be look into this and make a suggestion, but I'll decide. Lesser level of authority, lesser level of decision-making. Explore this and then decide within these parameters. More decision-making authority and perhaps autonomy at some level. And then finally, take care of this for me. Complete and total decision-making authority. And those are the different stages. And I have found this to be helpful when you're considering to whom should I delegate. And we're actually going to look at this in a little more detail just in a few minutes. So you'll see the correlation to it. But I think it's a good kind of a guidepost when I'm considering what I'm delegating and who I'm delegating it to. I think figuring out, spending an extra minute or two to think about where does this particular task delegation fit on that delegation continuum. I just think it gives us more clarity. So right now we're going to pause for a minute and give you an opportunity to do that leadership delegation inventory. I sent this out to you in an email yesterday morning about 10 of 8. I believe all of you have it. I know I spoke to a couple of you. You said you had it. Jim, you said you printed it out. Jason, you said you had it. Okay, great. If you don't, for some reason, for whatever reason, you missed that email, no worries. As I speak, Lisa Gallo, our producer, is embedding it in the chat box. So if you don't have it handy, you can click on the chat box on the middle of your screen there, the lower footer of your screen, and there it is right there. There's Lisa's just putting it in there. The leadership, it's the top one, leadership delegation inventory. You can access it through your chat box. But while you're doing that, if you have to do it, no worries. Let me just highlight the assessment, the inventory. So read over each statement carefully. Circle the number on the rating scale that best describes you. 5 is most like you. 1 is least like you. Tally up your score. Select one development opportunity, and then be prepared to share your thoughts and observations about the inventory when you're done. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put a timer on my phone here. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to complete that. And if you're done beforehand, just read over it and pay closer attention to that one item that you're going to consider as a development opportunity. But I'll go ahead and pause and allow you to complete the inventory. Okay, all right, that's my 3-minute mark. If you're still tallying it up, that's fine, go right ahead. General reactions, anybody? What were your thoughts on it? Did it make sense? Was it difficult? Anyone? Please feel free to unmute, share your perspective. Anybody?
I thought it was good. It gave you almost a self-assessment of yourself, of how you are as a delegator. Not saying that everyone's going to agree with your number, people that you delegate to, but it kind of gives you a inward look at yourself and how you do try to
which is a big part of why I use it, right? It gives you that opportunity to kind of self-reflect. But I want to speak to that point. That was a great point, that maybe not everybody else would agree with the same numbers. This could be another conversation starter. So you could very easily take this. You've got an e-copy of it, so you can print it again. You're welcome to use this in your place of business, your organization. And you could share this with your team and say, listen, I did this delegating inventory, and here's what I thought I'm doing really well. Here's what I thought I could do better. Have I missed anything? Or you could have them simply fill it out for you. You could say, hey, do this in the context of you're rating me on it. Now, that's being vulnerable. I get it, but that's a powerful thing. I think vulnerability is a really important part of what authentic leadership is about. It makes it safe to have a conversation about how do we get better, and that's a really good thing. But here's the other point. I don't really care about your score. That's not the point here. I think to your point, that was a good one, Adib. But also to add to that, it's about figuring out what's one thing here that you are not paying attention to that you could perhaps do more of. And I think that's the real value of this assessment, using it with your team, seeking their feedback, kind of using it in a 360 context certainly has value. But I'm also thinking that if you just look at it and consider what's one thing here that I could maybe pay a little more attention to, that in itself, in my mind, creates value. So I encourage you to think about that. Let's go a little bit further and think of these self-reflection questions. I think these are something that I said to you before. You'll be thinking about who, but I'm going to read them while you think about them. So what is one thing I can do to improve my leadership delegation capacity? What is one task I'm currently doing that I could easily delegate, or that could be easily delegated? What's one task? And then number 3, who on my team might be a prime candidate or a good candidate for delegating that task? So I'll go ahead and let you think about that for just a second. So here's a good quote. The first rule of management is delegation. Don't try to do everything yourself because you can't. I think that's a very reasonable quote to consider, right? But let's go a little bit further and think about creating this delegation framework. And I think that I refer to as the ideals framework. And so I'll just put them all up here so you see them. But it's a really good framework. It's a really good framework to consider. And so that first part is introduce the task. Here's what we're going to do. I mean, I think before this, of course, it stands to reason that we would have to identify the task and the individual that we're delegating to. Of course, that goes without saying, but I think I thought I would just mention it anyway. Demonstrate clearly what needs to be done. What is the outcome? Ensure the clarity and understanding. You know, one of the things that I've struggled with from time to time is thinking that, well, okay, they understand exactly what I mean. You know, I think that, and I know I've had this conversation with a few of you about the importance of expectation clarity, that we have a really important responsibility as leaders to ensure that our team understands our expectations. I think we also have a very good opportunity and a responsibility to understand what they expect of us, but that's a whole separate conversation sometime. But in the context of them understanding what you expect of them, I think it's very important that in some cases we go the extra mile or extra distance to ensure that our people on our team are absolutely clear with what those expectations are. Because here's what happens, and this is what I've struggled with, and I'll share that story with you, where I just assume that because this person has a really good track record of getting it done for me, they consistently understand me 100%. And that may be the case a lot of the time, but it's rarely the case all the time. And because we're all so busy and we're all moving at such a fast pace, it's entirely possible that from time to time, there's a disconnect in that communication that results in the person not fully understanding our expectations. I don't mean to belabor the point, but I think when we consider that a really, really big part of our job as leaders is to help our team succeed, then it goes to say, or it follows that we need to be very, very deliberate, mindful, even intentional, to that earlier point from Kelly, that they're clear on those expectations. Allocate the authority. You can read the rest of them. Let go. And that let go is a big part of it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. Letting go, sometimes, depending on the scope of the task or the people involved or the potential outcome, sometimes it's hard to let go, but when we're delegating, it's a really important part of it. And then support and monitor. So let's start with the first one, introduce the task. Determine the task that has to be delegated. This is pretty straightforward. Determine what remains, what part of the task remains, because it's entirely possible that in the bigger picture of the delegating of the task, they only are taking a piece of it. You're keeping a piece, maybe someone else is keeping a piece, and then it's about selecting the delegate. And then ultimately, part of that ensuring clarity of understanding is creating these what and why statements. And we're going to do an activity where I give you a chance to figure that out and create a what and why statement. A couple of them that we'll hear in a second, but that what is what I want you to do, and the why is why I want you to do it. And so, because I need to. So I want you to follow up with Mary Smith to get the information, right? Because I need you to make a decision on that feedback or whatever it may be. So the what and why statements are a pathway to ensuring a higher level of clarity and understanding. And so this next activity is going to give you an opportunity to create a what and why statement. So we're going to put you back in the exact same group that you had. You obviously work very well together, so I don't think we need to change things up at this point. If the scribe and spokesperson wants to do the same here, that's fine. If you want to rotate, that's fine. You're all leaders. You're all capable. I'll let you decide. Either one is fine with me. But here's what I'm going to have you do. And you're going to have up to 7 minutes to work on this. So as soon as you get together, I want you to kind of brainstorm what's a task that comes to mind that you're currently doing that you could delegate. And you can be thinking about that right now. And then once you do in your group, because you'll have 5 or 6 people in your group, I want you to try to flesh out a couple of that you're currently doing collectively, and then pick one that you could work on collectively to define a what and why statement for that particular task, okay? And then be prepared to share your input. But here are some examples that I have on the right there. So one example of a what and why statement would be, I want you to contact Mary Smith to get the sales numbers for October. The what is contact Mary Smith. The why is to get the sales numbers. I want you to review the customer feedback data and make a recommendation as to how we respond. So the what is, I want you to review the customer feedback data. And the why is, because I'm looking for you to make a recommendation, all right? So it's that clear. And so what we're going to do is with Lisa's magic here, we're going to go back into your 3 groups. Again, agree to the spokesperson and scribe, or scribe and spokesperson. It could be the same person. That would be fine. And I'll see you back here in 7 minutes.
All right, see you in 7. And for the majority, we're in the same groups. There may be a few that have shifted. Here we go.
All right.
All right, pausing the recording.
Back, everyone.
All right, the rooms are closed.
Thank you. It's good to have you with us back from the breakout. All right, so who wants to go first? Are we team number 1? Let's start there. We'll follow that sequence as we did before. Kelly, are you the spokesperson, or is there a new spokesperson?
No, it's me.
All right, go ahead. What did you come up with for a what and why statement?
Well, we got the what down really well. We were still working on the why. So I'll give you kind of where we were with the why.
All right, that's fine.
Okay. So the what is, Danny has Monday morning meetings every Monday with his team where they provide information about what's happening in the organization.
Yeah.
And he's feeling like he can delegate through turn taking the facilitation of that meeting to the different members within. And Danny, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's a department or an organization, but that the members of that Monday morning meeting. And so the what is, I want you to take a turn facilitating the Monday meeting.
Yeah, that's good.
Where we were working toward the why. So this is just a little bit of the thoughts that came up for more ownership, or to gain more ownership of the department and our activities. Yeah. And then and Danny, we started getting towards that to create a more cohesive team.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Does that make sense? It sounds great to me. Does anybody have anything to add to that? Okay, perfect. Those are for 7 minutes. You did an awesome job. Shout out to Team A. Thanks.
Thank
All right,
you, Kelly.
team 2, is that Adib?
It is, yes.
All right, so Adib, what did you come up with for a what and why? Thanks again, Kelly.
Yeah, so so the task is Sean's new to her role, so that she wants to have trainings being done by the staff. So staff training the clients essentially, or staff doing trainings with clients. There we go.
Yeah.
So the what and the why. Wanting staff to organize the trainings with the clients.
Yeah.
And the why would be being new to the role, so that Sean, because Sean is new to the role, having time to complete other tasks and meet other referrals.
Perfect. Nice job. Excellent job. Thank you, Adib. And then would that be Jim for our third group?
Yep, that's me.
All right. Thanks again, Adib. Thanks, Kelly. Go ahead, Jim.
So Michelle had a couple what and why statements. She has a new buyer that could easily take over some purchasing functions.
Yeah.
That the what would be increase her knowledge base and exposure to other staff.
Yeah.
The why would be to take workload off, grow the delegates' exposure to other staff and skill set.
Yeah.
And the second what and why statement was related to budget.
Yeah.
Michelle is a corporate controller that could easily take over some of that stuff as in her wheelhouse. So the what would be, essentially getting the budget's information to managers.
Yeah.
And the why would be because it's in their wheelhouse, their area of functionality. So Michelle can work on higher priority items, and the delegate can get exposure to other members of the team.
Perfect. Yeah.
And catch budget overruns and have a better understanding what's going on.
Great job. Wow. I mean, and look at that. Look what, just everybody pause for a second and think of what you were able to do with what and why statements in 7 minutes. You've got great, I mean, you grasped it, you got it. That's the important thing. But those are perfect examples. Those are all great examples. So thank you, Jim. Thank you, Adib. Thank you, Kelly. And thank you for everybody on those teams that got involved in it. Nice job, everybody. Let's go a little bit further and look at how we demonstrate clearly. And I think that becomes part of it, to show examples. I mean, again, this is about meeting those expectations, about making sure the expectations are clear, discuss timelines. You can read them, but I think it's really about absolutely making sure that they're clear on what needs to be done and they understand it. But here's another framework to consider, this mutual understanding. I think of it as the mutual understanding framework that some of you have seen this from the accountability program. But these are 6 key questions that if they are able to answer them, they should be able to, because effective delegation allows them to answer these questions with ease. They know what their deliverables are. They know who they're accountable or responsible to. They know what the desired outcome is, the timeline, the resources, and ultimately they can answer that question. I'm clear on what's expected of me. I think these are really good questions to consider. So letting go of authority, allocating authority and letting go, I think becomes a really big part of it too. And I think this is about figuring out how much authority do they need? How much do you need to give them? And helping them, setting them up for success. So for an example, you're delegating a particular amount of a task with a particular amount of authority that requires them to interact with some other people, maybe at your same level. I think there's a lot of value in being able to tip those people off that this employee is going to be reaching out to them. Again, it comes back to setting them up for success. And I think that making sure that they're clear on what their authority is and who they're working with and who they have access to becomes a really, really big part of it. So let's just talk about the obstacles. So lack of support, the manager and employees it must be fully supportive of the delegation effort to be successful. And I think that becomes part of it. And that's why the planning of it, I think, is so important, to be able to take the time to plan it. The failure to plan, I mean, that supports it too. Taking the time to follow those steps. And I had shared with you before that delegating continuum, back a bunch of slides ago, that looked at I thought of it as the 4 stages or levels of delegating, if you will. I think that's a better way of saying it. And thinking about that in terms of how much authority am I granting? How big is the decision? What is the outcome? We went through the rest of it. I think all of that can go a really long way in it. And then, early on, we talked about the lack of communication and that issue with the remote employees that has not left my brain since I heard it earlier. I can't remember who that was. Maybe it was Jim or Deeb. I don't remember, or someone else. I apologize if I didn't remember. But how do we deal with that? And I know that I'm pretty certain that I know what your environments are like right now in terms of how many are remote or how much of it is remote. I know, Jason, in your case, I would imagine you might have a smaller number of remote employees because of the manufacturing component. Maybe Kat or whoever else is still with us from Project Genesis, you probably have some number of remote in some of your locations. I get that. And some of the others and some of the other regional water, I think that you'd have probably a good mix. But I think the net result is the vast majority of you would have a mix of those. So what is it? How do we ensure? Does anybody want to weigh in on that? Because I think it's something that the vast majority of you are dealing with. How do we ensure effective delegation communication when the person is not necessarily in the same workspace that I'm in? Does anybody want to weigh in on that?
I know for us, what we do, sometimes you can't get across what you need to in an email.
Yeah.
So it's basically a phone call for the most part, for me anyway. I just been finding that a phone call works a lot better than an email, and you get an instant answer what you need.
Okay. Dan, that's a great insight. I think it's a really good solution, right? Because of that distance, perhaps that makes it happen. And then you also are going to get the tone too, right? The tone. You may not see them, but you're going to pick up more information by way of the phone. Good one, Danny. Anybody else? Can anybody else think of any other strategies for that?
So Dave, I think that Project Genesis has always had remote employees,
right?
Because we have one central office and people are off in different communities.
That's right.
So for us, in a lot of ways, I think that COVID has actually presented us with better opportunities to do delegation, to communicate with our staff because of the technology pieces that have come into place, and to be able to access rather than spending 2 hours in somebody doing a commute to go do a meeting. We can use technology in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I'm sure, and I think you're probably speaking this, Kelly, you're probably also referring to maybe doing it like this, like on a Zoom or Teams, right? Yeah. And I think that can build nicely off of what Danny said, so the call may work, but doing it that way is a good one. And great insight. Anybody else? Anything else before I go into the next slide? Great insights, both of you. Thank you so much. So here's a big one, fear of relinquishing control. I have heard from more than a few leaders, and probably more than I'd want to remember, who have actually said, when I've asked, why aren't you delegating more? I've actually heard some variation of the following, and that is this. Well, if I teach them how to do that, then they can do my job. And if they can do my job, then I could be out of a job. And I thought to myself, wow, what a interesting perspective. I think that's part of the scarcity mentality, to say the least. And I'm not judging, I'm not faulting, I'm just simply labeling it a particular way, which one could argue is judging, but I don't mean it in that context. But what else? What would be another example of fear of relinquishing control? Can anybody think of anything?
They won't be able to do it as good as you would do it.
Oh, bam. Yeah, I love it. How about that one? Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, it's one that I've been hung up on, because I told you about that feedback from the 360, and one of my first points of awareness with that feedback was, well, I think they're all really busy and I don't want to burden them. That was my first response. But then my second response, as I thought more deeply about it, was, well, on certain projects, I think I've got more skill in that area, so I should do it. You know, I want an A+ performance. I know how to get an A+ performance on that project, so that's what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to give it to somebody else. But then, of course, that creates the barrier between them and me, that I don't trust them, or that I'm playing favorites, which is neither one of them are good outcomes, right? So then look at micromanagement. So micromanagement is a great, you know, not a great thing, but it's one that gets in the way. And that's where, you know, I think at sometimes that micromanagement prevents the person from not only being successful in getting the desired outcome of what's been delegated, but also it creates a certain amount of fear or angst in them and others. And I think micromanagement, I kind of think, you know, as I've been so deeply engaged in conversations with leaders for so long, and particularly over the past couple of years through this pandemic, I'm getting a sense that this has not necessarily gone away, but I don't see many signs of it as much as I used to. And I don't know whether I'm not getting the whole picture here, but I think that because of what's happened with the pandemic and the change in the workforce dynamics, I think leaders are doing less of this, but I think it still exists. But let's take a look at about micromanagement and warning signs of it, because it's a really big deal. You know, micromanagement occurs when a manager assigns the task to the employees, but prevents them from doing it, from getting it done. And it may mean that they take the task back. It may, you know, this reverse mentoring or reverse delegating that was on one of the previous slides as a result of that. And that reverse delegating is when I delegate something to one of you, and then, you know, 2 steps into it or a couple of days into it, I take it back and do it myself. That's kind of reverse delegating, right? But this whole idea of micromanaging can be a serious barrier. So how would micromanaging show up? Let me tap into your wisdom on that. What would micromanaging look like in terms of delegating a task beyond what we have here? Can anybody think of anything? Anybody?
Nitpicking their work.
Yeah, there's a good one. Yeah, nitpicking their work. And so that's a great reminder. You know, you just inspired me to think of this. So we've had some really good insights here, and that's what I said in the very beginning. My hope and goal for our time together was to be able to tap into the wisdom here, and we've had a lot of good wisdom come up, and thanks for sharing that. But it reminds me about the opportunity for further self-reflection, to ask the question, how am I doing with that? You know, just like that earlier point about being intentional, you know, I needed to hear that today, to be intentional. It's such an important part of our job. The same as this, you know, do I micromanage? Where do I show up? Where might that show up for me? I mean, I know it's bad, but because I'm human, and I'm under a lot of pressure like everybody else, and we're all busier than we've ever been before, there's room for that. And so to me, it's that intentionality that says to self-reflect and ask that question, what have I heard so far today? And what are the things that I'm doing well? And what are the things, and that could be an added self-reflection question, series of questions. What am I doing that I maybe should pay more attention to, right? I think that's just something to think about. So here's some resources for you. A couple of thoughts, though, that I want to just share with you. Number one, you're going to see an email from me in 20 minutes, a half hour after the program, that has a copy of my most recent ebook, my most recent book in a PDF format, The Navigator's Compass. You're welcome to share that with anyone. You'll also have a link to the survey evaluating this webinar, which we'll also get to in a few minutes, but that'll be there. But then in this particular case, this learning resources is, I know many of you have seen it. There's a lot of new stuff there, but I encourage you to check it out, because on the website, my website being worktracesolutions.com, you have on the navigator bar, you have the learning resources is one of the items. And if you click on that, there's a drop down, rather large drop down menu that has articles, it has assessments, a lot of assessments, it has a couple case studies, it has media interviews, it has a lot of stuff there. You're welcome to check that out. You're welcome to download and share anything there. I do not track who's on the website. That's not my motivation. It's just there to help leaders to have conversations about leadership. So that's number one. Number two, you'll also be getting an email from me. I decided when you were in that room in the last breakout that I want to be able to be sure that you get a link to this recording. So I'll be sending you an email once I have it up on the website, which I'm hoping will be done by Monday next week, but give me an extra day. I promise I'll send a follow-up email to everyone on Wednesday next week with a link to the recording. So you are more than welcome to share that with your team, to come back to it. Apologize to them for me for the technical glitch in the beginning, but I do encourage you to please feel free to share any of that material. This is about helping to create a conversation around this important topic. And much of the material there is about that too, beyond just in the context of leadership. So let's just talk about from words to action. So we've had a lot of good insight today. I thank everyone who's taken the time to participate, to share. You know, I thank you for just being here, but for sharing is a big deal. So what was the most important lesson, reminder, or discovery that you've had in our time together today? Anybody? What's the most important lesson, reminder? And I use reminder very deliberately because, as I said early on, I think you know a lot of this stuff already.
I think for me, David, it was recognizing from that checklist that we did.
Yeah.
To have faith and spread it out amongst other people. I tend to go to those strong people all the time and do the same thing, but I think I need to really look across and let others develop and shine as well.
Yeah,
I think that was a great thing for me to see, because it's just so easy to go to those people that you know are gonna do it for you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And those other folks are feeling left out, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yikes. Good one. Thanks. Anybody else? Lessons, reminders, discoveries?
For me, it was what you could do better.
Yeah.
And that it was out of the list.
Mm-hmm.
Like what motivates my staff.
Yeah. And you know that I love the motivation word, and I use it a lot. And I use it a lot in the context of my own development, but also with leaders I work with. And the context there is, what's my greatest motivation for getting better at this, right? And that's not a question that's necessarily easy to answer, but I think it's one that's worth considering. And so in the context of, you know, when I'm learning a new skill or something, I'll ask myself that question: what's my single greatest motivator for getting better at this? And I think about it, and that I find I've used this for years, and I found that when I can get clear on the why, because that to me is the motivation, is the why. When I can get clear on the why, I don't know, for me, I don't know if it works for everybody this way, but for me, it allows me to make sense of it and stick with it, right? And so maybe in that note, it's maybe asking that question: what's my greatest motivator for doing better with delegating, right? And one other lesson, reminder, or discovery before I go to the second question. Anybody? One more. Lesson, reminder, or discovery. Jason, throw me a bone here, would you please?
I too also like the why. A lot of times you're so busy, so you're just telling people to do things, and you know, without the why, it doesn't. The why provides them purpose. So I think that's very, very important. And then I just think that you know, giving the positive reinforcement throughout the task is a good motivator as well.
Yeah, good one. Thanks, Jason. And so how do these lessons or reminders? I think you probably already answered this, but I'll give you a chance to, if you have anything to add. So how do these lessons, reminders, or discoveries impact your view of delegating? Do you see it differently now? Do you see it in a different light?
I do. I think it will give myself that trust issue. I'll trust more on my staff to, and not just think that I'm the only one that can get it done the right way. You know, it goes two ways. It works two ways for myself and for my staff.
Yeah, good, really good point. Yeah. And so what's one thing you can do in the next 48 hours to help build traction and momentum? Anything come to mind? What's one thing you can do in the next 48
I think
hours?
I might hand out your sheet here and have them judge me, and just maybe that will give me I know it's going to open me up for stuff, but it'll almost give me insight of what ways I can improve on how I do delegate.
Yeah. Yeah, shout out to you on that one. As I said, that makes it vulnerable, but vulnerability is a strength. And when we as leaders, and I never miss an opportunity to reinforce this, when we as leaders make it safe to be real, warts and all, to get better, to make progress, we make it safe for our teams. And oftentimes people are looking to us and to kind of to set the tone there and to set the pace. And I just believe that everyone here on this webinar gets that. But remember, you're the role models for it. And so while that's can be awkward and clumsy and vulnerable and frightening or scary at times, it makes it safe to have those conversations. And I also think a very important byproduct of that is trust, right? So if I go to my team and say, hey, listen, rate me on this, granted, some people are going to feel uncomfortable and awkward. You have to promise that you're not going to do handwriting analysis or anything like that, just to be on the safe side, but that's all good. One other thing, anybody else, one other thing you can do in the next 48 hours. Somebody has a call coming in, not me. One more thing you can do in the next 48 hours.
Probably reassess what tasks I have at hand and what I might be able to delegate out. Because I might make an assumption that these are things I have to do, but maybe if I relook at them, there might be some delegation there. So
yeah, good. And you know, I'm reminded of the fact that many of you are on this webinar with colleagues from your organization. And so I might suggest one other thing, and that is pair up with at least one other person from your team or from your organization that's on this webinar, and maybe just have that question. So what are you going to do with it? How are you going to apply it? Because, it's just like this process here. When I ask the question, what did you learn from it? So if we have 3 or 4 people say something, more than likely 2 or 3 or maybe 4 or 5 other people, when hearing those 3 or 4 people state what they learned, that sparked something for them that said, oh yeah, I relate to that I learned that too. So very good. So here's our leadership thought for today. I thought this was a pretty good one that fits in here really well. The secret of success is not in doing all of your own work, but in recognizing the right person to help you to do it. Our Andrew Carnegie, the great industrialist. I think it's one to consider, who can help me with this? What is the right opportunity? And, something I said earlier, and I think it's worth repeating here, is this. Whatever you have or haven't done with leadership delegation up until November 9th, 2022 is not as important as what you're going to do after November 9th, 2022. And so please keep that in mind. It's a building process. I'll just add one more thing to that point, and that is, if you look at your calendar and you look at, so we're in the 9th of November, we'll go back to October. If you think about in October and you consider how much did I actively delegate last month? Well, whatever that number is, the better opportunity is to ask the question, how do I make a slight improvement on that in November or December? And maybe even, this could be another way of looking at it. If I were to consider between now and December 31, how much delegating can I do in that time frame? Is it 3, 5, 9, 12? I don't know. Only you know. But I encourage you to think about that. And that's part of the journey of getting better at it, as so much of our leadership journey is all about. So I want to open it up for questions. We've got just a couple more minutes, but I want to share with you this last slide. Your feedback is a gift. It would be great to have your feedback on this. I apologize for the technical glitch. We got through it though, and thanks to you and Lisa, I tried to stay in my leadership zone and be a positive role model. It's a good lesson for all of us because freaking out accomplishes nothing. And so even though on a quick sidebar, when I went to get it on my phone, because I figured I had purposely had it on my phone, the link, in case, who knows? And when I got on there, I realized I have a new phone that doesn't have the Zoom app. And so I had to go to the App Store to find the app. It was so funny, but I thought, well, it's part of the journey on Wednesday the 9th. Oh well, not a bad thing. So anyway, thanks everyone. I wish you all the very best. I wish you a safe, happy, joyous holiday season. I'll be sending some follow-up to you in a little while. I'll also be sending you that link. I promise by next Wednesday. So we've got just a few minutes left. I'd like to just open it up for questions. Anybody? Questions?
I do want to say that I put that eval link right in the chat.
Oh,
so
okay.
if you all want to give us feedback right now, it's right there.
If you want to give us feedback right now, it's the eval. Thank you, Lisa, is in the chat box. You can click on that as well, and you won't be kicked off, or you won't be disconnected from the webinar if you do that. But we've got a couple minutes left. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Hey, Dave, I give you just some feedback. You know, I think it was slide 2 or 3. You mentioned accountability, and then it kind of vanished from your presentation. And I think part of delegation is the accountability piece, and the piece of the other person committing to actually doing the task being delegated. So just, I think that that's really important. And and they say they do say the number one failure of a manager, particularly newer managers, is that failure to delegate. And to delegate effectively, you also have to be able to hold people accountable.
Yeah, you know it, Jason. That's a big one. Yeah, and I agree completely. And I probably could have and should have spent more time on that, because you could be a master delegator, but if the person you're delegating it to is not accountable, and as a result, they get a lot of passes to not be accountable, well, then guess what? The impact of your delegation is pretty diminished, right? So yeah, really good point. And you know how my philosophy on accountability, Jason. I know you remember some of the conversations we've had. It's so true. And maybe that becomes a conversation. I'll just throw this out on that note. On the website under learning resources, there is a wonderful article called One Question That Matters. And that one question that matters is, how easy are you to work with? And it explores the correlation between the answer to that question and job satisfaction, all within the context of accountability. And in that article is a link to my Navigator Inventory 2.0, which is an accountability assessment that was the work of about 4 years of talking to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of leaders and individual contributors all over the country to identify what are the accountability behaviors that really embody success. And so I'll just throw that out to you for what it's worth. It's on the website. The Navigator Inventory is there as well under learning resources. But that article, and I know some of you have read it and have shared it, I've heard that feedback, but that article would be a really great way to initiate a conversation about accountability if Jason's point is ringing true for you. So thank you, Jason. Anything else? We've got 1 minute left. I promised you I'd finish up at 11:59 and a half. I'll gladly take one more question or comment if anybody has one. Okay, well then we're going to finish up at 11:58 and a half. Thanks everyone for your patience today. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your commitment to leadership learning. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if I could be of help in any way. Again, have a safe, wonderful holiday season. Lisa Gallo, thank you for all that you do to keep me on track today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.